Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Sorry for the short delay there. We had great intentions of bringing you far cleaner and crisper audio through some new technology we'd sourced for Graham, and it didn't work. But we will get that sorted over the weekend, and next week we should get rid of some of that horrible background noise and have this sounding way more professional. Important, I guess. Yeah, important, I guess, because a lot of you are listening to this as a podcast now, which we think is great. Really encourage that, and we'll make sure that you don't have horrible noises in your ears. Speaking of horrible noises, I'd like to welcome to the show my co-host Graham McDonald. How are you, Graham?
Well, given that I'm the horrible noise side of the show, I guess I'm doing pretty well, given that as an intro. It's a miserable wet day in car retailing out here in Western. Raining, probably the case of most of the country. If you're down on the sunny South Island and it's a good day, good on you. Here in Auckland, it's
fans. Have you still got that microphone plugged into your phone? You're sounding very funny.
Yeah, I have actually. This is the technical team for removing the microphone. So hold on a second. Is that better?
Yeah. We're back to normal now. I've got a weird feeling, and this is everyone else can ignore this, that we were picking you up from the microphone attached to the headset rather than the microphone. I think the headset might be the issue. But anyway, let's carry on. Busy week for us. You've recovered from COVID, and you're back at the yard. Everyone else seems to have COVID except for me. Knock on wood. We're preparing, as we just mentioned a couple of times before, for a bit of a road trip. This weekend, we're off down country testing out LDV's new MIFA 9 people mover. I think you'll enjoy it, Graham. I think you'll enjoy it. It's going to be a bit of fun.
I think so. Looking forward to it. I was going to say, has the ferry got tow hooks these days? So we might need them on Monday. Forecast is more rough.
I've never had to do a rough weather sailing, so that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. It might be brown paper bag time.
Maybe I might just keep it light at the what do they call it? The breakfast buffet. Yes. Yeah. Keep it light. Oh God. Well, if anyone has any stories about bad ferry crossings, then chuck them in the comments. That's going to be exciting, and we're going down to a couple of meetings in Wellington that I've got for some exciting upcoming stories. And then we are going to go check out venues for AutoTalk Live Christchurch. Round of applause. Woo! We're preparing to go down there in February or early March and bring the best of the Auckland show to our southern listeners / viewers / readers. Speaking of readers, AutoTalk magazine is out today. We have a great amount of coverage there from AutoTalk Live and a few other cool things. Don't forget when that email comes through today, click the link and check out the magazine. If you aren't subscribed, which I would be surprised if any of you aren't, to the magazine, it's free if you take it digitally. There is a small charge if you want to have a printed copy. Got to pay for that carbon somehow. And don't forget to make sure you're signed up for all that at autotalk.co.nz. And also, just make sure that you're not blocking Auto Media Group stuff from your spam junk filters. That does happen. We send a lot of emails. Just go and add that to your address book, I think. If you add media at Auto Media Group to your address book, that pretty much guarantees you'll get our emails. Now, let's kick on with some news today. And we're going to start with something that you could have picked, but everyone's going to go, why? But we'll give them a chance. And that is that NZAI, the parent company of Too Cheap Cars, has appointed another chief executive officer, replacing interim CEO Gordon Shaw. And they have again gone with someone who's not from the car industry. And I've literally had half a dozen messages over the last couple of days going, again? And we've said this before in our discussions here. Pick someone from the industry. So, NZAI has appointed DB Sales Boss as chief executive. New Zealand Automotive Investments, the parent company of Too Cheap Cars, has confirmed the appointment of a new chief executive. Paul Millward will head up one of the largest used vehicle dealer operations in the country, the latest in a series of leaders to come from an automotive retail background. His most recent role is with DV Breweries Limited, Heineken NZ, where he has enjoyed a 12-year career, most recently as Sales Director NZ since 2017. In this role, Millward was a member of the executive leadership team responsible for a team of 130 staff and revenue of circa $750 million. That's a lot of double brown. And I think great that they have got someone now. And I do hope the best for Paul, and hopefully he'll massively succeed, or depending on what side of the industry you are, maybe not. I don't know what you're thinking there. But I don't get why...
Richard, come on. Give him an opportunity, give him a chance. Okay.
Exactly.
I think... I don't know Marco Stanley, but I know Gordon Shaw. And look, these are people at the top of their game in the industry for quite some time, depending on where they come from. And you have to say that given their influence over the board and the board's decisions and directions, there wouldn't be a point in the sky for no good reason, okay? Just because we don't know him from the automotive industry. And we've argued this time and time again. Is it better to have somebody from the industry with all the traits and all the relationships, but also all the bad habits and all the way of thinking into a role like Too Cheap? Or is it better just to pluck somebody completely fresh that's got no concept necessarily about the car industry, but a really good, refreshing attitude towards retail and what customers today are looking for? And that could be the idea here, is just take a whole new approach to things. What has been in the past hasn't necessarily worked in their favour, so let's do something a bit different. I mean, who we criticise? Honestly,
couldn't you argue this is the same thing that's happened in the past? I mean, we had a banker previously, and then prior to that, a fashion retailer.
Yeah, I'm being politically polite here, Richard. To an extent, it might work. I don't know. Look, who are we to? I must admit, one of the picks, we won't go there into the details, we did look afterwards, having met them and had it been to a function, and thought, I'm not sure this is going to work out so well. And we all, I think, took bets at that time on how many months. And I think my bet of 8 months, we all bet of 8 months. We're about right. In this case here, got no background. But again, think about it this way. It's just a refreshing change. It may be what the company needs. Who are we to know?
I think the biggest challenge Paul's going to have, and that's, something that is that Gordon Shaw's been having to deal with for a while now, is sorting out the company culture there. Clearly, there's been some issues with company culture. Balancing the needs of the board versus David Sena, because clearly that has been a struggle in the past. Probably easier now that they have Eugene Williams in there as well. He's in for a big job. I think he's brave. I think that Too Cheap Cars has been a mincer for some senior management in recent years. Trying to find the right words there. I'm sorry, Gordon, if you're listening and you're offended. It's not aimed at you. You have made some big changes since you got in there, I understand, and things are heading in the right direction. But I think you're a brave man, Paul, and hopefully you can get something in the right direction. But I hope you surround yourself with some very experienced industry operators. I think that's probably going to be what I would say to that.
And there's a point here to that too, Richard, that's possibly not best left forgotten, is that we are moving into what is arguably going to be a really challenging year next year in the sector. And this is probably going to back your point up. 2023, we know is going to be challenging. And it's not just around the market, but it's around the challenges, the legislative challenges, whether it's Clean Car Standard or some of the other bits and pieces coming down the pipeline. You've got to say, surround yourself with people that are actually very, very knowledgeable in that area and know how to work that in with a retail framework, because it is the shoe store this time. And you're right, there's going to have to be a lot of really deep entrenched knowledge to help see this next period through. So you could argue that you're correct. Right now may not be the best time picking somebody from outside the industry, because you're going to have every part of your game at its peak to survive the next year at that level.
I would question whether they need to keep Gordon Shaw a little closer to the millstone than putting him back to the board. So he's returning to the board as a non-executive director. I would suggest that should be changed, and if the board of Too Cheap Cars is listening, I think Gordon should perhaps remain as perhaps general manager compliance or something like that, because he does have a huge amount of experience in regards to regulation and systems and government, And
Yep.
I suspect over the next 2 years, the business is going to survive or die based as much on how you work the clean car system as opposed to just how you run your retail operation. And you could make a lot of money off doing clean car right or lose a lot of money off doing clean car right. And I would suggest that Gordon's experience could be very helpful keeping close to the top there and in the day-to-day operations over popping him back to the just straight to a non-executive board member.
Yep.
So, that's my hot take on that one, my spicy take. Now, on to something I thought was kind of had gone by the by after several big stories years ago, and that's we've had a dealer ordered to repay a deposit following online auction shill bidding. So the disputes tribunal has ordered a car dealer to pay a $4,000 deposit to a van buyer following an online auction where the price of the vehicle had been pushed up by shill bidding. After the buyer purchased the vehicle through an online auction website, we're going to take a wild guess it was TradeMe, and paid the deposit, she discovered through social media that a Facebook friend of the dealer had pushed the price up by $4,000 during the bidding process. After she approached the online auctioneer and concluded the auction had been rigged through shill bidding and she did not have to complete the trade. The buyer then turned to the disputes tribunal to get her deposit back. When the dealer refused, he disputed that the bidding pattern was evidence of shill bids and that the second bidder was in cahoots with him. However, the disputes tribunal referee believed the evidence provided by the online auctioneer and made the refund. So
paraphrase, who won?
Yeah, I think the wording there. I'm going to go tweak that story. The wording's a bit funny, but the owner won. There was some shill bidding going on, so that concerns me. Well, look, it doesn't concern me. Let's face it. We all knew. I hope this is gone, but I guess we always knew there was a little bit of it out there. And in fact, I think I've experienced it on some other items recently. Hopefully it's not in the scale as what we've seen before, like the massive shill bidding that was undertaken by AutoCo Limited. But concerning that still happens. And
I was going to say, from a dealer perspective, or retail perspective, there are a lot of online auctions still going on within the TradeMe platform, for example, but they tend to be items that are actually fleet disposals. There's quite a few companies that do fleet disposals, or salvage, or trucks and machinery, or bits and pieces. I mean, everyone in that sphere is still running auctions. That's not a dying concept at all. But what is probably less prevalent now are dealers actually offering genuine auctions on retail stock. Now, that van, if that's an example of the high ace they were bidding on, that's retail stock, and there's far less of that, I think, now being auctioned. In fact, I'm surprised there actually is even auction. I'm not talking about the ones on TradeMe with a start price of $1,000 and the reserve price is $19,000, and that's just a way of getting it up in the listings, which I think, to be fair, if you're listening TradeMe, I think that's a bit sucky. I'm
going to suggest that wasn't a particularly representative image. I can go back and maybe I'll mention next week what the actual vehicle was, but I'm going to take a wild guess it was something a bit older and a little bit rougher. But even then, pretty much every high ace in the country sells. So I would question how far they were pushing it, and I wonder if that's how they got caught. Not to tell people how not to get caught, but I wonder if they went into greedy territory here on the value of the vehicle. You know, it wasn't just a case of they were nudging it with a mate because it hadn't been marketed particularly well and it hadn't gone anywhere. It sounds perhaps there was a little bit of profit boosting going in here or something. But don't shill bid people. Just market your cars correctly, and if you think you're going to need to shill bid the car to get the price for it to make a profit, then probably putting on the auction block is not the right thing to do. Is my take. And
there's another take out of this too, is that we've gone into a reasonably, say, a tougher period of trading. Okay, and again, next year might be even tougher again. We know time and time again, I mean, history repeats itself. It's when it gets a bit tough out there, we start to see the shady tricks box get lifted out of the back cupboard again, and we start to see more of this sort of stuff. And I think from a consumer's perspective, but also the trade, in terms of watching out the stuff out there that just shouldn't be, I think we're going to see a bit more of this. And I'm not just talking about shill bidding and auctions, just all sorts of shady shit. This is when when things are roaring along and everyone's just selling as many cars as they can just get onto the ground, new or used. You don't need to do anything at all that's a bit dodgy. But when it gets tough, you'll find that sort of lower fringe in the marketplace starts to think, wow, it's a bit been a bit tough this month, and I've got to pay the rent, and I've got to pay this. And again, that's when the box comes out of the top shelf that says shady shit.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right, on to, well, I'm not going to use the term shady with this one, but let's just say that it's shady adjacent. And that is that Zuma Car Finance is in liquidation, and I'm in no way implying that Zuma Car Finance or its parent company NZ Fintech were shady, but the parent company NZ Fintech did operate in a market that was regulated because shady characters were working in it. And that is that, so if we go back to the actual story itself, Zuma Car Finance, they're Christchurch based, have gone into receivership and liquidation. So, and at times, controversial finance company and its vehicle lending subsidiary are now in the hands of liquidators and receivers. NZ Fintech Group, which owned the short-term lending brand Moola and car finance brand Zuma, has been placed into receivership, while the latter is now in the hands of liquidators. NZ Fintech had hit the headlines multiple times over Commerce Commission concerns relating to Moola's lending practices, as well as a case relating to anti-competitive actions relating to search-term advertising. I'll go more into that in a second. Zuma had made big noise in entering the market, but failed to live up to the hype. It worked both direct-to-consumer and through dealer intermediaries. NZ Fintech is owned by Edward Rickorden. He told the NZ Herald the collapse was due to an equity deal falling over at a late stage. The company was expecting a large equity deal to settle in September, which did not end up completing at the last minute and was the key driver for the position they're in today. The buy now, pay later options had taken considerable share of the finance segments in which Moola operated. So, now, there's some background to this story, and I'll pull this out of the thing now. So, NZ Fintech is one of those companies that loves to run around saying they're disruptors, but behind the scenes they were just a finance company. Interesting name for a company that, was just that. They spent a lot of money marketing Moola. Moola was a massive cash generator for them back when, prior to the triple CFA, when you could charge, and prior to prior regulation, where you could charge big interest rates for short-term loans. And we're talking, I'm not going to quote numbers, but big interest rates. Like, you could pay multiples of what you borrowed. And that led to fast growth. They decided to get into the car finance industry, obviously, realizing that someone was going to step in and start regulating that short-term payday lending loan market eventually. A lot of talk with Zuma, and don't really seem to have taken that much for the market, probably because they didn't advertise in AutoTalk. But they behind the scenes, I have heard rumours that they actually wasn't so much a case of they failed to get this new funding across the line, and they had actually sought funding from multiple other companies around the place and within the industry. It was at an earlier funding round. They reported last year that they had $50 million in funding committed for the launch of Zuma. That some of that had actually been pulled by the investors. So it's a slightly more complex situation than we're looking at. So basically they were in a dodgy area of business. They were trying to go to a more legit area of business. The funding from the other area of the business, I guess, ran out before they could shift completely into a more reliable area of business. So, it's an interesting story. Now, the search term thing, what they were basically doing is other finance companies out there were doing what companies do and buying or bidding on search terms related to the same kind of stuff that Moola was doing and variations of Moola's name. They threatened to take court action against those companies and then made agreements with those companies for them no longer to cover those search terms. And what that does is that actually artificially suppresses the price of online advertising, and also reduces the ability for the public to find brands other than Moola. So that is why they got pinged on that. I think they had a fairly substantial settlement they had to pay to the Commerce Commission, and also they were caught up a couple of times on just rates being, I think, various things related to the rates they were using and who they were lending to. So interesting to see them go.
Somebody said to me a long time ago, it's a phrase that stuck with me. In that particular sphere, and I'm not insinuating this is Moola's business pattern, but so often we see, I can sum it up, shit loans on shit cars to shit people. And if you look at so many issues in our industry when it comes to finance, that's what it boils down to, is that you're working in an area that's just it is always sketchy around the limit in terms of affordability or long-term borrowing consequences or backgrounds or defaults or all these different things. And it's that big balance up is, do you need to lend people money? Do people need financing to update their cars? And if they do, where do they go? Because the traditional tier one lenders just don't want to know about it. And I think, we're sort of talking about triple CFA and things like that, about what that means for the industry going forward. One of the big glaring gaps is, how do you fund people that have got dodgy credit if you are removing all the abilities that there were in the marketplace, albeit at a higher cost, to fund on that dodgy credit? And before you pick up the phone and say, hello, Graham, the answer, I don't believe, is the government stepping in and funding it. That's not my intention. But there's got to be some sort of intermediary. And the likes of Moolah and others have been trying to operate perhaps in that area that just gets really hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, look, the government has attempted to back some stuff through BNZ and other community organisations to play in that area. I don't think Zuma's vehicle lending here was the issue, though I suspect that what has happened there is they haven't grown as fast as they could have because they gone in and been a disruptor and done it, put all this online stuff out there, but haven't necessarily actually engaged enough with the dealers to move that fast enough. We don't know. We won't know what the actual issue is until we see the receivers and liquidators reports, which I don't believe are out yet. I think really it was just a case of the whole Moolah thing and their expansion caught up with them. And they weren't transitioning fast enough out of a dying industry. That payday short-term lending industry has died a death since the since triple CFA and since the prior restrictions on interest rates. They had a big structure that came down. I also stand by something I've said before. I said at the start of this, I said before, is that I'm always wary when someone comes into the industry saying they're a disruptor, because you can be, and this to an extent I think actually applies to too cheap cars. You can disrupt all you like, but you have to get the fundamentals right. And you talk about too cheap cars, you talk about Tesla, you talk about BYD in Australia. These are all operations which have come in and said we're going to disrupt, we're going to do things differently. And ultimately, they've all had issues with making sure that the fundamentals behind the scenes of actually getting cars in, getting cars out, selling them, dealing with people in the right way, at times during their histories have not gone well.
Who would have thought, right?
Yeah, disruption, good, but you got to get the fundamentals right. And I suspect that's what's a part of the issue here with Moolah. And, a lot of these people look back to Uber and various others about, Uber came in and disrupted the market, all this kind of stuff. They got the rules changed, so on and so forth. Uber did that and continue to do that by burning billions of investors' dollars. And that will pay off one day because they will have rewritten the rule book. They've rewritten the rule book in their market. But unless you've got billions to disrupt and break everything, then you've still got to actually make sure you've got a viable business underneath.
Isn't the term disruptor now sort of, I think it's very much a 2000s term, leave that behind. But it's always harks back to executives with no clue, who drank way too much coffee as an excuse for just the same business model with a bit of a skin over it, perhaps. Because you're right, fundamentally, in our industry, we buy a car, we then do stuff to it, and then we sell a car, and that's it. Make money in the middle.
Yep.
Little bits and pieces around the edge, but yeah, fundamentally, is that disruption to do that a little bit differently? Buy it, sell it, bit in the middle.
Well, it's disruption if you change the way the vehicles are. You change elements of it. Disruption is good. I'm fine with disruption, but unless you've got an investors behind the scenes throwing billions at you to be able to run it until you've broken and rebuilt the industry, which is what Uber's done, then you've got to make sure you've got the business underneath to do it. I mean, there's literally a term in that kind of startup disruption space. They don't really talk about their profits or their loss or their thing. They call about their burn rate. You literally have to have money to burn to disrupt in that kind of way. You've got to be able to wait out the entire industry and wait out the government. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Beside the point. Now, let's talk about some statistics. So, vehicle arrivals were steady in November. We've had a bit of a long run down with these, but A total of 21,346 vehicle inputs hit the wharves in November, down 6.5% compared to the previous month. The total number of passenger vehicles was up 2.7% month on month, with 17,790 vehicle arrivals in November compared to 17,322 in October. This included 11,493 new cars and 6,297 used cars. That is not a lot of used cars, especially considering we've got a bit of a deadline coming up. Year to date, there have been 188,181 passenger vehicle arrivals. Yeah, that's a low month. Just saying.
Yeah. Just
saying.
And it's not just saying. I think everyone's talking about it, particularly in the logistics sector. Because if you think about the one part of the industry that has the most difficulty adjusting is actually logistics, whether you're in shipping, supply, compliance, biosecurity, because you are volume driven. Everything's about volume for you. And if the boats ain't bringing cars down, then somewhere in that supply chain is going to get very sticky. Whereas dealers, you might argue and say there's always ways of doing things to generate extra revenue or do different things. Hey, be disruptors. But no, it's tough, I think, in the logistics sector. And the hardest thing is not being able to predict what's going to happen. Normally, our industry follows, cycles. You can sort of watch the ebb and flow of the supply vehicles from Japan, for example. But we haven't seen those patterns to that extent this year at all. We're sort of seeing an anti-pattern. And if you're crystal ball gazing and saying, well, what am I going to do next year? How many boats do I need? How many compliance staff do I need? Do I take the lease on that compliance shop? Do I put in extra booths for steam cleaning? All these different questions. I don't think anybody right now has the answers, and it makes it very difficult to forward plan. We just don't know anymore. What we do know is this has been a really ordinary, particularly second half of the year, and it's not going to make our annual statistics for 2022 look particularly pretty.
No, it's not. And I've got I guess a little bit of an interesting kind of discussion around how the arrivals look in comparison to the clean car discount coming through. Now, clearly the new car guys have gotten some stuff flowing through and being prepared so they can go through. Compliance-wise for the used car stuff, talking to people out there, there just does not seem to be a wave of product coming through. It's not like other things where we've seen thousands of vehicles hit the wharf and get ready for sale. It's just quiet, apparently, to the point where, not quiet, I mean, there is a little bit of movement out there, but quiet to the point where I'm hearing that some of them are doing what they don't necessarily do normally, and actually having a little bit of time off over the holidays. So, it's going to be interesting to see what people have to sell in the new year.
Well, and it's not the sort of segue towards CCS, but I'll guarantee to you that an awful lot of traditional dealers, and we're talking about the used sector here, have no idea what they're going to do. And they've got little idea about CCS and very little idea about what that actually means. And again, I don't mean to harp on about it, but there's just such a small amount of information out there amongst the wider industry, I think. And the big groups, the big solid operators, they're fine because, been playing in this game a long time and they've got the nous to go out and do research. But that second tier of the industry, and there are so many vehicles that go into it that are not seen at that top end. They're clueless. And I don't blame them for being clueless because actually there's no way of predicting how you can actually manage your business into next year. So would you go and buy up large for all the stock in the last couple of months, knowing CCS is coming out? Would you suddenly race up to Japan and buy all this non-compliant or at least carbon unfriendly stock? No, because you've got no idea what it's going to do in the market, what it's going to be worth, how you mitigate that against your clean stock. You just don't. You've got no idea. And so everyone, I think, right now is sitting there scratching their collective heads going, I just don't know. I'm going to watch, wait and see. And then I'll just take the consequences next year as it comes.
And, of course, if you've got stock waiting for a 25-year rollover, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Or waiting for parts.
Yeah. And I think that was actually a cruel twist to it. I still don't believe that the way it's been put together at a compliance point rather than a border check point, as it's always traditionally been, I think that was one of the downsides to the CCS legislation, is that it's actually been a a bit of a cruel blow to a lot of people waiting with that sort of stock. But also, if you've got vehicles stuck in the pipeline for a number of different reasons that you can't get complete compliance on, it's I suppose anti what I call fair trade, anti good faith. And I've said it time and time again, I think there's actually possibly a legal angle to take on this one, because you literally have had the decision taken out of your hands by rushed legislation.
Right, well, let's move on to the next story, and that is that we have another brand entering the market with a diesel ute, with probably maybe a bit of an emissions bill attached to it. Another Chinese ute is to launch in New Zealand with an electric option. There it is, the JAC T9, specialist vehicle importer and distributor BLK Auto, is introducing a new range of diesel and electric pickup trucks to Australia and New Zealand, with the Chinese manufacturer JAC T9 to land in the country midway through next year. BLK Auto will import two versions of the dual cab 4-wheel drive T9 pickups with a 2-litre turbo diesel in June 2023, followed by an electric version in the second quarter of 2024. Australia and New Zealand were the first international export markets for the JAC T9, which is currently only sold in China. BLK Auto has had the new JAC N55 electric truck in trials in Australia and New Zealand for the last 2 years, and is aiming to leverage the launch of the pickups to establish a comprehensive dealer network across both markets. BLK Auto Managing Director Jason Bukotic said that JAC T9 would be priced similarly to Chinese manufacturer pickups such as the GWM Cannon and the LDV T60. So that's it there from the front. I've got a couple of extra pictures here that our ute aficionado Graham can pass judgment on. Here's kind of the full view of it.
Yeah, about that. I was looking at the first photo thinking,
actually, no. I'm gonna apologise. I actually think that might be the older model that I'm looking at there. But here's the rear of the current. That one I think is actually the previous generation.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll see the difference in the lights at the front there.
That's your granny's toast rack at the front. I just say to the stylists on that one, maybe sort of put the pen down a bit earlier. Maybe it was extra time Friday when that one was penned.
Here's the rear of it, which I actually looks pretty decent.
Yep. It's got tail lights, it's got a tailgate. Yep, got a bumper, got a back wheel mounted up high.
And there's the interior with the now prerequisite vertical LCD screen.
Yeah, that's right. That's now become industry standard, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, good luck to them. Good. It's a pretty crowded segment. And one thing I think we know about that segment to an extent is there's two parts to it. One is fiercely brand loyal. Okay. You've always bought Hiluxes, you've always bought Rangers. And there's a bit of that sort of, Kiwi, dare I say, Kiwi male mentality is that's what you buy. You buy a proper truck, Brucey. And there's a part of the market that is definitely moving into the LDV and the JAC and the stuff that's what I call sort of second tier in the marketplace. The question is it going to grow that market, or is it going to just split and divide that market with yet one more product offering? So if you're not brand centric, if you're not bothered about the fact that it's not a mainstream brand truck, is it going to make you buy that, or are you already considering one of those anyway? Do you know what I mean? Is it just going to split the market?
I actually think what it does is it doesn't actually compete with much of the new car stuff. And you don't see the fleets tending to pick them up a lot. Where no. I think that plays a part, and I actually think this might be a positive part in the trade, is that there is a big trade in high mileage name brand utes in the used market going for horrendous prices for often at times some fairly flogged trucks. And there is a segment of the market that either can't afford a new Hilux, because let's face it, new Hilux now or Ranger is now a big ticket proposition, and justifiably so. And so they tend to truck on out to a big used dealer on Great South Road and go and spend $25,000 on something that's come off a fleet with 250,000 k on it, and go and finance themselves up for a rather large amount on that And okay, sure, they're happy, but versus they could go down to one of these Chinese dealers, get something that's at least got a 4 or 5 year warranty on it. These vehicles tend to come with great warranties, probably a lower finance rate and a promotion finance rate, and have something that's new and has a little more safety features in it. I ultimately don't know which one they're better off in. I think probably slightly better in the new vehicle than the higher mileage vehicle, but that's debatable. I think these are probably. I do think these vehicles, like a lot of the electric stuff, is actually bringing people in who wouldn't normally buy a new vehicle. These are people who normally would skip a new ute. If you're a Hilux buyer, if you're a Ranger buyer, you're not really going to be swayed. But if your budget is for a used ute, then this may get you in the other way. Now, the vehicle that she up until recently kind of filled that role was the Mitsubishi Triton. That was always kind of the value offering in the ute market.
Yes.
But again, that vehicle has gone a bit up market, and again, quite deservedly, has gone up the price scale a bit, and is commanding good money at the new car dealership level. And again, that's probably opened yet another window underneath that for these other more options to drive through. These vehicles are harder hit by the clean car discount and clean car standard, though, because if you were talking about, by the time you laid or both on top, essentially an extra $8,000 a cost on a Hilux. The average Hilux buyer is going in there buying a nice higher spec Hilux, throwing some accessories on it. As a percentage of the vehicle purchase price, that clean car chunk is big, but it's understandable against the overall purchase price. If you're talking about a $40,000 ute with that same big chunk of money attached to it, it is harder. And I know some of the people speaking to management, some of those companies, and they've said it's been really hard for them since Clean Car came in. But on the reverse, those Chinese companies are going to be the first ones with hybrid and electrified options in the market. The T60 EV is now rolling out as an EV. The JSC have said they're going to have an electric version sooner rather than later. Great Wall have hybrids arriving early in the new year in the ute market. So, yeah, counter, I guess. We'll see. I'll be interested to see what it's like to drive it.
I hope it's good. It's not about how it drives. It's not about how it drives on the test run in the first 6 months. I just hope the stuff, particularly the stuff, the BEVs, the EVs. I hope it's good enough to be durable long term. Because let's face it, we're not particularly good on our gear here in New Zealand. We run our gear reasonably hard. And if this stuff's going to survive and be the catalyst for people making a wholesale change over to a different mode of propulsion in the hallowed ute sector, let's face it, because that is kind of the holy grail, is converting the ute sector of New Zealand over to an EV ute. If this, I call it beta, if this beta stuff coming around, it turns out to actually be a bit shit, not in the first 6 months, but in a year or 2 or 3 and there's issues, it is going to make that whole mountain going forward a whole lot harder to climb, because every Ranger owner says, yeah, see, I told you so. I told you that stuff was crap. I knew it would be any good. I knew it'd be no good on the back blocks. I knew it'd be no good here. And it just makes it a whole lot harder for that whole sector to move forward. So it's got to be good. And it's got to be good long term, not just the first year.
We say the beta, and I think what you got to do is look to the second generation product. And the only second generation Chinese EV product we've got in New Zealand so far is as far as commercials, is the E-Deliver 9, the LDV E-Deliver 9. Yep. So they had a electric EV80 prior to that, which was a little bit of a mess. It was a tool, it did okay. But the E-Deliver 9 is kind of their second crack at it. And I think that is a very good vehicle. Aside from it could do with some slightly higher safety equipment specifications, it is a solid effort. It is competitive with other vehicles in the segment. And you've driven it, Graham. I'm sure you'd at least part agree with me on that.
It's really good. As a new vehicle, it's really good. I mean, I was really impressed by it. But again, I come back to the same point. I want to know what it's going to be like in 5 years' time. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because in New Zealand, that is such an important part of the sector. And that's the part we want to get across the line moving forward. If we truly want to green our fleet, as it were, that's the sector you've got to get across the line. It's no good just talking about new. You've got to look at its downstream long-term viability as a used vehicle into the market to get over that big bubble that's going to happen. People that just can't afford to buy new stuff, what do they do? So it's got to be good.
Yeah. Now we're gonna buzz through fairly quickly to two last stories because we've hit like 40 minutes now, so we should try and wrap this up soon. So, Bowater Twitter is piloting a low emissions vehicle subscription scheme. A pilot subscription vehicle scheme in Nelson is being run by Bowater Twitter with an EV and 6 hybrids among the 12 vehicles available. The EV is a Lexus UX300E mid-size SUV, offered for $30 an hour or $150 per day, with a compact Twitter hybrid offered as low as $15 an hour or $75 daily via a Twitter mobility project app. Bowater Twitter's website explains people can book a vehicle on their phone from the wide range available. Most of the demonstrator vehicles used for test drives, so they can use the right one for the right purposes. Fuel is included up to 70 kilometres on bookings 2 hours or less. The site adds, you've got to be a pre-approved customer. Look, I think it's always interesting to see, we've seen a lot of subscription talk around the place. Interesting to see a dealer giving it a crack. Dealers make sense. They're usually in high traffic areas. The cars can be serviced and cleaned on site. If you're talking about electrified stuff, it can be charged on site as well. And I think there'll be a lot of dealers looking for alternative income streams and alternative ways to utilize stock as we get particularly through the next interesting, challenging period. Any thought of renting a few cars on subscription out of the yard there, Graham?
No, but I was just thinking the last time we had a bit of a tough run in the marketplace, think about the last GFC. I know a lot of dealers actually turned to rentals. I mean, and we sort of laugh about it, but no, it's actually quite the truth. There's a lot of dealers went into that sort of, particularly the budget end of the rental market. A lot of them got their claws in at that particular point in time. It was a way of actually moving stock, getting it through. And it was almost as if you could depreciate it as a rental down far enough so you could then tip it out at the other end at the 3-month, the 6-month point on the books and still make a profit and meet the market conditions. So this could just yet be. We talk about 2023 being a toughie. You're right. This could be that next version of it.
And it could be a good time from a business perspective as well. So I recorded a story with NewsHub this week where they were talking about a massive shortage of rental cars. And this is in part down to rental companies generally taking new vehicles. And a lot of the ones that used to run used import vehicles have shifted to new vehicles in recent years because of acquisitions. But they just can't land the vehicles. And the fleet is about half down, 50% down on what it was before COVID. But the tourists are back. And there's going to be a massive shortage this year. The prices are up. You might better get a rental car if you tried for the Christmas break now. So if you do have some stock lying around that you can't move, maybe it's time to quickly jump up, set up a rental website and run down the road and put some costs on some of those cars you can't move and see what you can get for them.
It isn't quite as easy as that, having some experience in that particular sector, no. So before you think about it, dear audience, there is a bit more to it than just that. But it is actually, there is some viability to that model, but be prepared to.
I would suggest, particularly if you're in regional New Zealand, because I think regional New Zealand tends to be a little bit better, less served when it comes to rental vehicles. But we'll see. Yeah, go have a look at it. Could be an option. Last story, and just a nice last little quick one. Eagers Automotive celebrates technician's 40-year milestone. John Andrew Ford and Mazda Henderson technician Anthony Savage has been congratulated by his employer Eagers Automotive in reaching 40 years of service for the company. The Savage was acknowledged at the recent Eagers Automotive Long Service Awards evening for his significant achievement amongst many other long-serving staff members. Eagers Automotive also extended a special message of congratulations to Savage on social media. So, 40 years as a technician on the tools. I mean, some of the stuff that he would have seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is an achievement, isn't it? 40 years in the service department. It would drive me mad. I'd have just walked into the ocean by now if I'd done 40 years in a service department. But yeah, look, I've got some experience with the team down at the local service centre here in Henderson. I'm not more than a stone's throw out from here, and they're a good bunch of roosters. And I suppose there's the thing. You work at so particularly if he's been with Ford his entire life, the Ford product, which obviously he has. He's worked with a pretty loyal brand. It's been consistent all the way through. There haven't been a whole lot of significant changes. It's been what I say when I sort of consistent brands all the way through, and well do him for serving that right. It's probably been a very, very interesting ride for him, but a good product to work with.
Yeah, good little operation. Good little operation down there. I've had my car serviced down there, and it's they do a good job out of what is a fairly out of the way and unseen facility.
It's an old Gilmore's warehouse.
Yeah, but it seems to do the trick. So why can we argue? Look, anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. We are, as we said, we're going to head off this weekend and drive a Chinese electric vehicle after all that discussion from Auckland to Christchurch.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I'm going to spend some time on an actual dealership on Tuesday afternoon, which will be fun. I haven't spent a huge amount of time on dealerships lately, so it'll be good to meet a few customers and see how they
Bring a
do
clip on
sell
time.
things. Yeah.
Bring a clip on time. Best point, please.
And my white
Have I got a
shoes.
deal
Yep.
for you, mate?
So we will be on the way. If you are near State Ho 1 on Sunday or State Ho 1 in the north of Wellington around north of the South Island on Monday afternoon or Tuesday,
clear.
then wave us
Watch
down.
out.
Yep. Look out for the baby blue LEV MIFA 9, we will. It's not Graham. It's a comfy vehicle. It is a comfy vehicle.
Oh, I know.
I
I'm
assure
just the colour. I'm like, on the colour, but I'm looking forward to the vehicle itself. Colour's not everything, right?
Yes, exactly. So, we'll catch everyone later on next week and go, if you're listening to stuff on the recording, thank you for doing that as well. And don't forget you can subscribe on podcast apps, all these kind of things. I think now that we're blowing out well past half an hour, it really is probably better consumed as a podcast, but that's up to you. So, Anyway, any last words, Graham?
Yep, happy Friday. It's going to be a bit of a shitty weekend, but try and do some business anyway, because it is getting up towards Christmas, and people are going to need a car to go away in because they can't get rentals. So how about you make it a weekend we provide their transport solution for the holidays? And have you considered buybacks?
Yep, time to start heading people up to get that car back. Sell them a new one.
Got it.
Awesome.
All right, happy weekend.
Okay, mate. Catch you later.